Good morning, wherever you are and whenever you're watching. Welcome. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. Two phrases from yesterday's testimony that really stick out to me. You can't polish a turd is the first one. That was legal mindset. This is terrible. It is a terrible, terrible trial. I have tried to condense this down because it was just full of boring, not useful information. And honestly, I think everyone that is watching is really angry about it. Oh my word. No amount of polishing is gonna shine up the turd that is the state's case. I really don't get it. Before I start with my rant, please hit the like and subscribe button. Please watch as much of the video as you can, because all of those things really, really help, and it's free. They help get my channel out there, and I really appreciate everyone who does it. The summary of this is we had information from Jan Malinowski from Palmetto State Bank. This is without the jury in the room, talking about, you know, the loans and the dodgy fraud and everything else, and the fact that he had an inside man. Everything was agreed with one of the executives at the bank, a guy called Russell Lafitte. He, his son, and his daughter are all on the board of executives for that branch, and they were all voting to, yes, Alex Murdaugh can have whatever loans he wants, whenever he wants. There was no paperwork done. Questions started to be raised by the higher-ups. Then paperwork started appearing that was backdated. So tracks were covered. Russell Lafitte, it appears, I'm not 100% sure on this, but it appears he has been charged and convicted of conspiracy to commit fraud. So, you know, more evidence of Alex Murdaugh's fraudulent doings. Cross-examination, they admitted that Alex Murdaugh always paid, he never defaulted. Maggie Murdaugh, it turns out, was due to meet the state bank appraiser at the beach house the day after the murders to renew a matured mortgage, and the bank was never flagged for audit because of all of this. It took a long time for this to be raised with anyone as an issue, a bit like the fraud at his workplace. We then heard from Michael Statterfield, who is the CEO of Bank of America, but he didn't testify about kind of banking stuff. His mum, Gloria, was the housekeeper for the Murdaughs that slipped and fell, banged her head, and died a couple of weeks later from her injuries, very sadly. Alex Murdaugh said he'd go after his insurance company to get the medical bills paid and to get Michael and his brother about 100 grand each in compensation. It turned into a lawsuit. Alex Murdaugh brought in a couple of other lawyers, but Michael felt that, you know, at every step of the way that Alex Murdaugh was his lawyer, and that's who he was going through. Despite the fact that Alex had said to him, look, it is a conflict of interest, so I'm bringing in these other lawyers. He asked for updates, and every couple of months Alex would say to him, look, it's slow going, we're still getting there, everything else. Michael got some paperwork to do with the trailer and medical bills, which he then sent on to Alex Murdaugh as his lawyer, and he thought that was dealt with. In June 2021, so around the time of the murders, there was a news article stating that there was a settlement in the case, which Michael knew nothing about. He then started to try and contact Alex Murdaugh, and he doesn't know how many phone calls he placed. And Alex Murdaugh didn't start to pay up until after the fraud kind of came out into the public eye. Alex Murdaugh received 2 settlements from 2 different policies. One was for $505,000 and the other one was for $3.8 million. And the sons of his deceased housekeeper didn't see a penny of that until after all of the fraud came out. So again, great case for fraud. Doesn't mean anything in the context of this trial. In fact, it just introduces more people that could be suspects. The defence then cross-examined Michael just to ask whether he called before or after the murders, and he didn't know. There was a court break, and during that court break, someone commented on Kurt's stream on Uncivil Law, Bentley RM, and this is a direct quote: "The fact that the chat is having to speculate so much to be able to say he's guilty means the state isn't doing their damn job and have nothing but the fraud." And Bentley RM is right. We are having, in the chat, we're having a back and forth of, okay, how do we think this ties in? And we're having to really push to find that link. And what makes it worse is there's been an uptick in comments in the live stream since the in-camera review hearing started about the fraud, of people saying, oh, he's guilty. It's so prejudicial. If it is swaying people in the chat who are watching this, is it swaying the jury? Or is it going to sway the jury if they hear this stuff? We then heard from Carson Burney, who is a forensic accountant. He analysed a bunch of Alex Murdaugh's accounts to follow specific money, the $192,000 with the Chris Wilson link, a $750,000 loan and a $225,000 loan. I'm going to save a lot of waffle and just say that $385,000 of that went to his dad. He paid off or paid a chunk off a credit card for $7,500, and $200,000 of that went to Curtis Smith, who I think is his cousin and drug dealer. And that was in lots of payments of different amounts over a period of time. There was also $184 that went to Scott Harriet. No idea if that is relevant or not. And all the way through all of this financial stuff, and again yesterday, the defence were like, we're not disputing this for the purpose of this trial. Like, admit it into evidence, which it just goes to prove that they're like, you've got nothing. You've got nothing for this trial. The jury came in and we heard from Thomas Darnell, who is a SLED fingerprint analyst. Now, there was a lot of waffle about fingerprints, how they're lifted, what techniques they used for different surfaces and everything else. It went on for a very long time. And every time that happens, you think, right, we're getting to the nitty gritty. The reason they're telling you this is because they've got something. They've got nothing. I can condense this really easily to, they have no usable prints. None were found on anything. Guns, cartridges, ammo, mags, phones, nothing. There were prints on the phone, but they weren't usable. The defence came in and cross-examined him, and he admitted that prints are fragile, that we don't always leave fingerprints. It depends on how sweaty someone is, what the weather is, what the environment is, you know, loads of factors as to why you can't get a usable print. He also said that, yes, he would have been more thorough at the crime scene, but he's not gone out to crime scenes for a very long time. No one from the latent print department that he works in went out to this crime scene. That, yes, he would expect notes or a report on what had been checked and what hadn't been checked. You know, he was asked if there was a trained technician on the scene to process and collect prints, and he said he had no idea, but crime scene people were trained in print collection. No bloody fingerprints were collected at the scene. As far as he's aware, they didn't check the door to the feed shed or kind of around that area where Paul was found. And after that, he sounded really dejected when he left the stand. It just looks like the state have done no prep in terms of what they could face in cross-examination. We then had a bunch of SLED officers, just this parade of SLED officers that came in, were sworn in just to say, yes, they'd taken a buccal swab from a bunch of other people. And I think that is purely to dispute the idea that they weren't thorough in their investigation. But we have a bunch of evidence that shows that they weren't. There was a brief break in which Kurt absolutely lost the will to carry on, because it was just so dry and boring and led nowhere. And again, it was being kind of almost attacked with data that led nowhere. His quote, which is the other quote that really stuck with me yesterday, he said he was promised John Grisham and got Keystone Cops instead. And that is absolutely how it feels. It's like the Wish version of a trial. He then did a recap. This was the best bit of the day for me, the recap using his hands as a puppet show. That's how bad this trial is. We're watching because we are interested. We are invested in where the evidence goes. I'm making notes. I am spending 8-9 hours of my day in Kurt's stream because I love his analysis and his banter, and the chat is amazing. But we're all tearing our hair out because it's going nowhere. We then had Paul Greer, SLED firearms examiner and ballistics identification. Now, there are no rules in South Carolina about points of comparison. So fingerprints don't have a minimum amount of points of comparison. The bar is really low. It's the same with ballistics. Now, we use ballistic evidence here, but the way we process it is a lot more scientific. It comes across in his waffle that it's by eye, and it's a judgment call on whether something matches or not. And then he then writes up his notes and worksheets. They go to someone else, and that someone else looks at all of the evidence without checking his notes and writes up their own worksheets. And if they match, that goes to court. So it's really subjective. So what I've written here is ultimately he looks at stuff and makes a visual comparison, and sends his worksheets to someone else. There was a lot of waffle. This guy was boring. He was not engaging at all. Now, I love this stuff. I love the minutiae of forensics. So I thought I was going to be really invested. I just wanted to scream into a pillow at how boring this was and how much of it was not relevant, because it was a good hour or more of waffling about how he checks weapons, what he checks, where he checks, how he checks, to get to the only thing that could vaguely be matched was the cartridges found near Maggie's body that cannot be matched to the projectiles that sadly took her life, were consistent with being loaded into and ejected from a gun on the property. Everything else was inconsistent or inconclusive. So what you're telling me is shotgun shells or cartridges somewhere on a hunting property. Bearing in mind, they have collected cartridges from all over the place. They were scattered all over the property. So she fell on some cartridges that cannot be tied to the crime at all. He couldn't tie the ballistics. cross-examination was fascinating, or it was at least a little bit more fun, because he was squirming. He did not like being questioned on his profession. He was evasive. He wasn't answering yes or no questions. He says it's an exact science, but ultimately everything is inconclusive or not a match. So the state witnesses are boring. They are derailing everything with this long foundational stuff to say nothing, and it takes the defence to come in and say, so you were saying this, and clarify, condense it into something that is layman terms for the jury. That shouldn't be the defence's job. The prosecution's job is to put their case across. They have the burden of proof. So it should be clear and concise. Use the technical term, then tell people what it means in layman's terms. And then connect the dots, and they're not. They are not connecting any dots. It feels like they were not ready on the murder charges. So they are trying to pin him as a terrible person because he's a fraudster, and therefore he must have committed these heinous acts against his family, which just is not a valuable link. He gets nothing out of his wife and son dying because of all of the fraud debt. He's not going to see any of that money. It's not going to make his life better. It's not going to make the fraud charges go away. It's not going to make the civil cases go away. He gets nothing out of it. In fact, as you know, a prosecutor, he would know that would make his life worse. He's only going to buy himself a couple of weeks for grief, and then it's and things are still happening in the background. His lawyers are still working on these cases in the background. It's going to give him 2 weeks, if that. And in that time, he's got to deal with funerals and estates and his father dying and everything else. It's not going to get him anywhere. So the story isn't there. And it is really bad. I went back through my notes before I did this video and realised that I'd forgotten we talked about the finances at the beginning of the day. I'd completely forgotten about those witnesses. And I'd started to forget about the fingerprints during the ballistics bit. That's how bad it is. I'm making notes. Honestly, I want to scream into a pillow. Even LawTube, people who are wildly intelligent and trained in this field, are saying, how do I make this fun and engaging? How do I put this across and keep up the energy? And the answer is, none of us can. It's just hard work to listen to all of this and get nothing out of it. So basically, we're still where we were yesterday or the day before. We're a week into testimony. Yesterday was day 7 of testimony, and we don't have anything at all, physical, emotional, anything that ties Alex Murdaugh to the double homicide of his wife and his son. The nearest you can come is he was in horrible debt, and this was a hit for kind of related to financial crimes, or a hit related to drugs, or a hit related to the boating accident, or a hit related to the victims' families of the financial fraud that went on at the law firm, or it's to do with a banking fraud. Like, the state has given them all motives. Even the law partners at his old firm have 10 million reasons to want to mess up Alex's life, because they had to pay back all of the money out of their pocket to the people he defrauded. So you have given all of these people great motives. That's my reasonable doubt. There are too many people that could have done this. There you go. It blows my mind that this came to trial. It blows my mind that someone went, yep, this is a slam dunk, we'll take it to trial. We can win this. It's sloppy. And the state of reaching and trying to admit attorney-client privilege conversations because, you know, there was a third party that overheard it, or they're trying to sneak in the finances, they're trying to, you know, anything to make this guy look bad. Like, at the end of the day yesterday, they wanted to call a witness who was privy to a conversation between Alex Murdaugh and his attorney. The guy the person they want to call is a partner at Alex's former law firm. Well, that's not a conflict, is it? That's perfectly fine. There's no reason that person would get up on the stand and carefully word things to make Alec look bad. I'm not saying they'd lie, but it's really easy to make him look bad. So they've got nothing. I've got nothing. I've got a bunch of theories over, you know, who else could have done it. But I have nothing on Alex Murdaugh to report. So I'm sorry. You can't polish a turd. I'm trying. I'm really, really trying. What did you think of yesterday? If you're watching, what do you think of my recap? Leave me a comment, leave me a question, and I will get back to you. Please like and subscribe to my channel. Help me grow, help my analytics. I really, really appreciate it. I will be back next week with more recaps. Let's hope that there is something. Let's hope that the defense get to do their thing, because I think they are going to be a lot more engaging, and I hope their witnesses are a lot less boring. Anyway, have a great weekend, and I will speak to you soon.